we're going
How's
to not
everybody?
be starting right on time because, as you can know, technology and getting how many people that we have registered today to try to get them to come on board.
How's
And
everybody?
I see another one of our speakers is here
Yeah.
early. Mariel, how are you?
I'm good, thank you.
Good.
And thank you very much, Mariel, as well, being willing to speak regarding employment with persons with disabilities in the province.
Good afternoon, Wayne. How you doing?
Hey, good afternoon, everybody. How's everyone?
Hi.
Hi, George.
Hi.
Hi,
Hi,
we're all
everyone.
good, Wayne.
Awesome.
It's a beautiful day, so it's in March, February, March, when it's beautiful like this, you have to be happy.
That's
Indeed.
right,
I mean,
Shelley.
it was, yeah, even this morning early, it was like 4 degrees. That's awesome.
Yeah,
Just think, we're almost there. 3.5 more weeks to spring.
yeah.
And
It's in the affirmative,
Yeah.
Wayne.
Wayne, just 1 second. I see Dr. Mariel Levesque has joined us. Mariel, how are you today?
Oh, I'm good, actually. Thank you.
Good. And thank you very much for you being here. And I just want to kind of tell everyone, we will at some point, soon as we get the go-ahead, to make an announcement. But because Mariel's here, I do want to say we're very pleased. Mario, I reached out to him, and basically he has created a class at Mount Allison University with 3 fantastic students that's doing some research in our top priorities that we have identified. And we're very pleased about that.
Happy to do so too.
Jeff Sparks is in the house.
Jeff
Hi,
Sparks
Maria.
in the house. Oh, there he is.
Yeah.
Hello, Jeff.
Hello, everybody.
We're just running, we're not going to start officially yet till you can imagine we have a number of people that have to come on board. So we're just waiting.
Yeah.
Sounds good.
Wonderful. And I don't care to say this in front of everyone, Stephanie, the MLA from BC, hopefully she will be here. And I just kind of allow her to introduce herself when it's time to speak. Jeff, I don't know why she didn't get back to you.
Yeah, I have it.
Oh, you have it?
100 paper submissions, and then we received over more than 400 submissions through the online microsite. So again, lots of engagement there, and that's just in my writing. I can't speak for Mr. Arsenault or Mr. Lazone or
What's going on?
Mr. Blake or anybody else.
I just lost you. 1 sec here.
I'm sure we all reached out to our constituents at that time. I understand that also there was consultation that went on between the Prime Minister. The Prime Minister met with
Someone tell me
opposition
who's
leaders as well.
speaking right now.
Just a sec.
I think there's
In the
some
background.
Fix that.
I don't have that in front of me, so I can't substantiate that. But I think some of the folks that may have participated in that
1
may even
second
be
here. I'm gonna
in the meeting
do a
today.
mute all here. Here we go.
Okay,
There
but I
we
don't
go.
know. I don't know what that was.
Yeah, I think it was Lane Long. I saw his screen flickering, so I think
Yeah,
he's on the hop as well.
Okay, yes. He's in committee.
I have a question, actually.
Okay,
Who is that? Or this?
Danny,
Oh, Danny?
Danny.
Was it?
Yeah,
Yeah.
I have a question. Are we also gonna talk about like raising the disability income as well?
Not today specifically, but that's something you could bring to our attention. You can just send it to the email that you registered,
Okay.
and we'll take a look at it.
Or you could join us. It's free to have a membership and you can keep bringing it up. It is something that's in our that we're looking at.
Yeah,
And we've got a brand new website and we can hook you up with other groups throughout the country. And we will be doing some work with a group from BC, Plan Inclusive, and to get feedback on the national plan when the first pillars come out. We've been asked to help do that for New Brunswick,
Yes.
which is awesome.
yeah, because the thing is that,
Because I don't know about the rest of you, but I do not like being treated like a secondhand citizen.
yeah, because I find that people with intellectual disabilities for a long-term disability
Right.
only receive $7.79, and that's not a living income. By the
So,
time
Danny,
Mhm.
guaranteed income is our top priority.
yeah,
That is something that we've identified, talking to members and the board have voted on, like our top priorities. And I'll just mention them while we're waiting here. Our top priority is guaranteed income. Number 2 is affordable, accessible transportation, both urban or rural in New Brunswick. Number 3 and 4 is disability supports. And 4, but not least, is affordable, accessible housing in New Brunswick. And of course, we as we move forward, Muriel, the vice chair, can attest to this, and communications, things keep cropping up that we don't quite fit into our priorities, but that doesn't mean we don't address them.
yeah.
Which has happened.
Now, one thing I'd like to understand is what is Bill C7?
I can
Muriel, do
answer
you want to
that.
comment on that before? Muriel, do you want
Well,
to say something?
why don't we, because it's time to,
Yeah, yeah,
Yes,
that's what
Shelley, sorry.
I think we should just get started. And Danny, what we could do is we can hook up, I've got your email and all that. So we could get started with this and then we can reach out to you after the meeting or tomorrow and we can get into all that with you and set you up with some great resources to work, that can work with you and you can work with us and we can do.
Okay,
do
I have a
what's
question,
best
Shelley.
for
How many
everyone.
people that have registered are
All
here
right,
now?
perfect. All right, so I'm just gonna quickly do this.
There's 36 people, Brent.
Yes.
Okay,
36 and we have 50 that were registered. But I'd
Yes.
say we just start and because we
Okay,
had some that said
okay.
they have
Perfect, that sounds good to
meetings
me.
and they're gonna join
That sounds good
when they
to me,
can and
so,
things like that. So we are, so just why might we just before we start so that everyone knows, we are gonna record the session because unfortunately we were not able to provide closed captioning this time. So from the recording, I'm gonna feed it through my phone.
well put, Shelley. Okay,
All right, and it's you.
Okay, we'll get
Go
rolling.
ahead, Brent.
Okay, thank you, Shelley. Welcome to our first but not last Ability Forum. My name is Brent McPherson, and I am president of the New Brunswick Coalition of Persons with Disabilities. And I would like to thank you for being here with us. We will be delving into a very important subject, the lack of a Disability Act in New Brunswick. There are currently 3 provinces with a Disability Act in the country: Manitoba, Nova Scotia, and Ontario. And we hope New Brunswick will soon have one as well. Please visit our Facebook page, as Shelley said, and newly created website. And you can sign up on that as a member, and the membership is free to join us in fighting injustice in New Brunswick. Now it gives me great pleasure to pass the forum to Jeff Sparks. Jeff, National Director of Engagement and Organizational Development with the Muscular Dystrophy Association. Thanks very much, Jeff, for agreeing to moderate. And now it's over to you.
Thanks very much, Brent. It's a real pleasure to be here today. I'm very pleased to be able to facilitate our session. I will let you know that we do have a very strict agenda for today, so we will keep to the time that we've identified. At the end of each speaker, there will be a brief opportunity to ask questions. However, if we do not get a chance to answer all of your questions, we'll ask that you either send an email to the organization or potentially put your comments in the chat function, which is at the bottom of your screen. We do not have French translation, but we do have a number of French speaking individuals on the coalition board. If you would prefer to ask the question in French, they will facilitate translating that for the speaker for you. I will ask you to unmute yourself. If you do have a question, you would have the potential to raise your hand. However, I don't believe that function has been enabled in the software today, so we won't be able to do that. So we'll just ask you to unmute or maybe give a wave. Does anybody have any questions before we jump into our presentations? Great, well, let's jump into our first speaker. I'd like to welcome George Wentworth. So George is a married father of 3 boys. Before his C5 spinal cord injury, he worked as a carpenter, part-time sheriff, and co-owner of a special care home. He's always enjoyed working with wood, so after his injury, he converted his woodworking shop and began producing cutting boards, serving trays, transfer boards, and other simple wood products. Currently, he is a patient experience advisor with Horizon Health and the president of the Ability to Budget. So welcome, George, and we'll hand it over to you.
Thank you. Thank you for having me here today. Brent asked me to do a presentation on what does a New Brunswick with an accessible NB Disabilities Act look like to Ability New Brunswick and our clients. When I started working on this presentation, I was under the incorrect assumption that a Disabilities Act controlled things like curb to street transitions and minimum door widths, maximum wheelchair ramp inclines, toilet seat heights, accessible shower egress, the minimum width of accessible hallways, having braille on public office doors and elevator buttons, and the list goes on and on and on. Haley, our executive director, quickly set me on the right road, and I soon realized that I had signed up for something that I had very little insight into. As someone who grew up in construction, I quickly associated it with how things are built and necessary modifications that standing construction needs to undergo to become fully accessible. Disability can't be an afterthought. Like, for example, the last minority group to get a COVID relief package were the people with disability tax credit. And even then, it was a fraction of what other packages were. An important step at the beginning of this process would be for the government of New Brunswick to change the definition of a person with a disability to align with the definition in the UN Convention on the Rights of Persons with Disabilities, who describes persons with disabilities as those who have a long-term physical, mental, intellectual, or sensory impairments, which in interaction with the various barriers may hinder their full and effective participation in society on an equal basis with others. We believe that for any New Brunswick Disability Act to be effective, it should have a strong employment focus, with the government of New Brunswick being the leader or being a leader in the hiring, advancement, and retention of persons with disabilities, and to set the standard for diverse and inclusive workplaces. I think that the COVID-19 pandemic has amply shown and shown that many people can work from their home environment and be just as effective, if not more, in their typical office building workspace. For example, instead of the cost of retrofitting both the living space and workspace of a potential employee with a disability, have funds in place to make the necessarily less costly modifications to their living space and have them work mainly from home. Now, I'm not saying that this plan will work for every disabled employee, as it would further isolate them from the community. Better yet, let's have a one person, one plan model where all viable solutions are tabled and the best one chosen by the employer and the employee. There are endless possibilities and solutions to get people with disabilities into the workforce and keep them there. Keep them there, earning their salary, paying their way, being productive members of society, paying taxes, and boosting the economy. Any provincial accessibility act will need to address transportation, not just accessible transportation for a few disabled people to get to the same services that ordinary people need to access, like doctor's appointments, grocery shopping, surgeries, and heaven forbid, even some leisure and entertainment. It must also include accessible transportation for the disabled employees that they have now empowered to go to work, who can now afford to travel and go on vacation. Government and the public in general must understand that people with disabilities have the same need and want to travel that they do. Not just to travel within city limits, but to actually travel between cities, travel to airports, and around the province to tourist attractions. I think it's pretty safe to say that the average person who has no idea the amount of planning and limitations involved in a person with a disability going on vacation and visiting tourist attractions. There needs to be a governing body that assesses and grades and proposes remedies and improvements to current tourist attractions, travel centers, hotels, motels, restaurants, and other amenities that are used and enjoyed by people without disabilities. Disabled New Brunswickers need to access the same customer services in the same capacity that non-disabled people are able to. Some of the barriers that disabled people may face may be due to technology, staff attitudes, information and communication, physical barriers, and even an organization's practices and procedures can be some of the things that prevent people with disabilities from accessing their services. The bottom line is that there needs to be a culture change in New Brunswick, and we hope that this will be it, so that the powers that be then take accessibility and inclusion more seriously and ensure all programs and services are designed well and built with accessibility and inclusion from the ground up, including the design of public spaces and communication and information standards. I feel like we need an infomercial on how the present state of the New Brunswick government and public view of what accessibility means impacts and impedes the everyday ordinary lives of people who live in our province with a visible or invisible disability. We need to do this on repeat on in every government office, public TV screen, and cable channel until each and every viewer who lives in this great province is one viewing shy of being sick of it. Your everyday, ordinary, able-bodied person doesn't have the ability to conceptualize the debilitating impact of a disability and how far-reaching it is into often every facet of someone's life. I'm sad and a little embarrassed to say that before I was injured, I was one of those people. I really didn't have a clue. I have often wondered if this is the case because I'm an only child and I'm selfish. Looking into it more deeply, I've come to realize that that's not the case. I'm a firm believer that experience is the best teacher. And that is why I've become an advocate for the disability community and focusing on the humorous side of things because I like to laugh and I like to make other people laugh and everybody, making sure that everybody doesn't think I take myself too seriously. I've told my story many times in public and private settings so that everyday ordinary people, just like I used to be, can get some of that experience through the lens of my stories. Now, I'm not saying that the infomercial is the best idea or it's the answer, but I will say that the disabled community as a whole needs to have multiple loud and articulate voices telling our stories with brutal clarity in the right circles where the people who make the legislation and have the dollars can't help but take notice. New Brunswick has the second highest rate of disability in Canada, and because of that, everything in this province needs to be viewed through that lens. The disability community needs to have voices like the suffragettes, or one of my personal favorites, Martin Luther King, because I too have a dream of a society that doesn't rate people with disabilities as second-class citizens. Thank you.
Thank you for that presentation, George. And I just want to, before Jeff continues there, I just want to make note of a couple of things. I would like to thank the assistant to Jenica Atwin, the Member of Parliament from Fredericton, for attending the forum. And also Dr. Ed Doherty, a longtime champion of disabilities in the province. Thank you very much, Dr. Doherty. Okay, Jeff?
Thank you very much, Brent, and thank you, George, for the amazing presentation. We also should acknowledge that we also have Member of Parliament Wayne Long on the line as well. So welcome to the call, Wayne, and thank you for participating. We know that you're a huge voice of the disability community, especially through your work on the Human Committee. So thank you for joining us. Okay, does anybody have any questions for George? Perfect. So I'm now going to introduce our new speaker. However, I do not believe he's joined us. Can we confirm that David Lepofsky is on the line?
I have a question for George, actually.
Okay, who is speaking? Sorry.
Dan Robichaud.
Hi, Dan. Go ahead.
George, I was overhearing your a few things that you mentioned, and one of them was about the COVID-19. In terms of the vaccine, like whenever they come, do people with intellectual disabilities have the right to take it or not? Because sometimes if we have medication that, or we've been in the hospital for more than once, really, I'm just wondering, like,
yes,
for me, I'm epileptic and I take 2 types of medication. I've been in the hospital 3 times and I'm scared to death, like right now. Like if they say, hey, you got to take this shot right now. Well, I don't want to take the shot because I'm scared it's going to harm my body, plus the medication on top of it, and make me sicker. And my second question is, in terms of transportation, like you were mentioning, well, you know how sometimes we have home care workers or something like that? Well, I've been experiencing a lot about that, and apparently it's only like for basic essential things that my worker has, like my main social assistance worker has been stating and saying, I can't go to this place, I can't go that place. It's not like I'm asking you to go to Orlando, Florida. I'm just wanting to go to places just like everybody else and a normal person. That's all. And those are my questions. So, what do you think about any of the
Okay.
answers that I gave?
As I haven't heard anything in regard to the vaccine being compulsory for anybody at this point.
Yeah.
And as far as accessible transportation goes, I'm not sure what your question is. You mean whether accessible transportation is available or whether it's covered through social or the.
Okay. Maybe I can state it a lot easier. So let's say, I don't know, like you guys have cars, you guys can drive, you guys can go where you want, but for some odd reason, the workers are limiting us where we can go. And it's like, we should have the right to freedom where we want to go in Moncton. But, you know, like, I had a answer from my worker, and they said that my direct social assistance worker, he said that apparently I could not support my nonprofit organization.
If I may interrupt.
Because it wasn't a goal.
Dan, Muriel is speaking there.
Hi. I'm gonna ask if I think Wayne Long would be a perfect person to answer some of Danny's questions if if he wants to.
I think he just went off camera, so he may have been called back to committee.
What we could do,
Danny,
we may
Hi,
have
folks.
to take-
Oh, sorry. My name's Jody, and I work with Wayne.
Okay.
Here.
Thank you.
Perfect.
Yeah.
Perfect.
So I'm here, but and listen, if anybody has anything, I don't want to take away from your presentation. So
Right.
if anyone has any questions that they need answered from a federal point of view or anything, just please reach out by email and we'll make sure to get back to you.
Yes, and we will, Jody, we will, as a coalition, if Dan informs us of what he's asking there, and we will follow up with that as well, Danny.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, Danny.
Okay.
We will email
now,
you tomorrow,
Jeff,
Danny, and we'll get.
I'm going to ask people to speak one at a time. We have
Okay,
people
Jeff,
speaking over each
the
other.
next speaker, she was here, and I think she is still here, Ainsley Congdon from the Learning Disabilities
Yeah.
Association. So
Okay,
we'll move to the next speaker.
Okay, so before we start her in a little early, Ainsley, are you prepared?
Sure, Jeff.
Okay, great. Thank you for your flexibility for jumping in a bit earlier than scheduled. I'll make a brief introduction. So Ainsley is the Executive Director of the Learning Disabilities Association of New Brunswick and has been with the organization since 2017. She began her work with the association as a learning specialist, providing support to individuals and families affected by learning disabilities, as well as managing the Barton Tutoring Program. In her role as Executive Director, Ainsley continues to provide support and advocacy to persons with learning disabilities and has begun to increase awareness on learning disabilities through presentations and training. Ainsley has a Bachelor of Arts from Mount Allison University with a major in English and minor in history. as well as a Bachelor of Education from the University of PEI. Ainsley began her teaching career in Sackville, New Brunswick. A move to Pembroke, Ontario provides the opportunity to work with high-risk youth as a residential group home and a teaching position in the English department at Algonquin College. Ainsley lives in Ormond, New Brunswick, with her husband and 2 young children. So Ainsley, thank you for joining us today, and we'll hand it over to you.
I'm just
Perfect.
gonna,
I will.
sorry, Ainsley, I'm sorry to interrupt you. I'm just gonna throw a monkey wrench because I know Mr. Lepofsky just joined and I know he's on a time crunch. So we might have to do a switcheroo right here. I'm not sure. I'll leave this up to
No, that's
Brent
okay.
to decide what's going on.
Our keynote speaker is actually on a very tight time crunch, and I guess we must be running. So Ainsley, we'll come back to your presentation right after he does. Is that
I'll keep
okay?
I will keep everyone in bated breath. It's fine.
Okay, perfect. Thanks for being patient and understanding. Mr. Lepofsky, Jeff, can you introduce our keynote speaker?
Yes, I will gladly introduce Mr. Lepofsky. Mr. Lepofsky, before I do your introduction, I will let you know I've taken the liberty of choosing a few highlights from your bio. I won't go through the whole thing because it's very impressive, and I think it would take the whole call if I read your entire background. So I'm just going to give a very brief introduction. So David Lepofsky is a visiting professor of disability rights and legal education at Austin Hall Law School, and the past a joint member of the University of Toronto Faculty of Law. He holds volunteer leadership roles in the disability community. He's chair of the Accessibility for Ontarians with Disability Act Alliance. He's a member and past chair of the Toronto District School Board Special Education Committee, appointed by the Ontario government to recommend reforms to tear down barriers impeding students with disabilities. Since the late 70s, he's been active in volunteer capacity, advocating for new laws to protect the rights of persons with disabilities in Canada. In 1980, he appeared before the Joint Committee of the Senate and the House of Commons and the Constitution of Canada on behalf of the Canadian Institute for the Blind for an amendment to the proposed Charter of Rights to guarantee equality rights for persons with disabilities. The efforts of great many combined to lead Parliament to pass the Disability Amendment to the Charter. From 1994 to 2005, he led the Ontarians with Disabilities Act Committee. That coalition campaigned for 10 years to win passage of 2 new Ontario laws to make Ontario fully accessible. The Ontarians with Disabilities Act in 2001 and the Accessibility for Ontarians with Disabilities Act in 2005. Since then, he's had efforts to get the law implemented. In February 2009, he became chair of the Accessibility for Ontario with Disabilities Act Alliance. He and the Alliance have pressed for the prompt enactment and enforcement of the standards under the Act. In 2010, they succeeded in getting Ontario election legislation amendment to address accessibility barriers impacting voters with disabilities. Although they have more to do to get telephone and internet voting to become a reality in Ontario. In addition to advocating at the provincial level, he has led the AODA Alliance advocacy efforts to secure enactment of a strong accessibility legislation at the federal level, appearing before the Standing Committee and the House of Commons in 2018 and Senate in 2019. His advocacy efforts combined with those of many others led to the enactment of the Accessible Canada Act in 2019. Commissioner Lepofsky, thank you for all of your work on behalf of those with disabilities, and I'll hand the floor over to you.
All right, thank you very much. I want to first make sure you can all hear me. Can you all hear me?
Yes.
Yes.
Great. And the second thing is, I don't know if you're recording this at your end, but can you just, whoever's running the Zoom meeting, can you just give me permission to record so I have a copy of it on my computer? You just go to participants and beside my name, you'll see an other options and you just have to click on allow me to record.
No one attending. This is the chair of the coalition. No one attending has an issue with that.
I'm not
If you
going to post
do,
it. It's just for
like
my
Shelley
record.
said, you can turn off your video.
Yeah. We've just allowed it,
I
so.
just did
Okay.
it.
Yeah.
Got it. Let me just get to the right place here. Okay, hold on. I don't know if I'm recording or if I'm not recording. One sec. Oh. No, I'm doing good. Okay, sorry about that. Okay, good afternoon, everybody. Greetings from snowy Toronto. I hope you're all staying safe, and I'm honored and appreciative of the opportunity to speak to you. I'm not going to use up all my time talking. I'm going to offer you some opening remarks, and then I'm going to open it up to a chance to take your questions or get your feedback. Understand you're interested in looking at the idea of why provincial accessibility legislation should be pursued and working on it. I want you to know on behalf of the AODA Alliance, which I serve as in a volunteer capacity as the chair, that we'd like to do whatever we can to help you with that. We've worked with folks advocating on this issue in Nova Scotia, Newfoundland, BC, Manitoba, and we are happy to share our experience and our expertise, however that might work. I think somebody is not muted, and there may be some background noise, so I think you just might want to everybody make sure you got there. That's good. Whoever it was is now muted. Let me just offer you this. Having been involved for over a quarter of a century in this unusual hobby of mine, community organizing and advocating for accessibility legislation, I have seen this as a cause that has really effectively brought people with disabilities with very different agendas together under one tent, has brought political parties who disagree on almost everything else to vote in unison, have brought us to the table with educators, business managers, and the like, all willing to talk about things that we need, but that were never before discussed in those kind of ways. We folks with disabilities, let me start with some basic facts that you can't disagree with, that nobody would disagree with or could. People with disabilities live in a world that is designed on a basically pervasive but ridiculous premise. It's not one that anybody concocted or deliberated on, but it's out there as if they did. And that is that the world we live in is largely designed for people without disabilities, as if it was one in which only people with disabilities were going to live in and use. The buildings that we go to, the public transit we ride, the schools and universities and colleges where we study, the workplaces where we want to work, the stores where we want to shop and the products sold there, even the courts where we go for justice and the laws that they implement are all built and designed and operated on the fundamental pervasive premise that they are first and foremost, if not exclusively, for people without disabilities. So when we come along, people with a physical or mental or sensory or neurological or communication or mental health disability or any other kind of disability, we're kind of treated as that exception. Oh, well, what can we do to accommodate you? What different can we do because you don't fit in? It's kind of like saying, let's buy shoes for everybody, but it's a shoe that our foot doesn't fit. And then we have to come along later with this shoehorn called the Human Rights Code or the Charter of Rights and try to squeeze into a shoe that was never designed for us in the first place. So what do you do about it? It's a really silly situation, but it's pervasive. It ultimately hurts everybody because everybody either has a disability now or gets one later. We're the minority of everybody. And yet we live in a world that's designed as if the minority of everybody wasn't there or shouldn't participate, or if we're included as kind of an afterthought and an exception. So what do you do about it? Well, we've been down a road, and I'm inviting you to join in this travel. At the first phase, we recognized that we had this problem. We thought, well, you know what? The biggest problem we face is the attitudes of other people. They don't mean to exclude us. They just don't know better. And if only we could raise awareness and educate them, that heck, these problems would be solved. Well, we tried that. Doesn't work. It doesn't work. It's not that that we can never persuade anybody to change what they do. It's just that if you think we're going to educate every principal, every school board, every teacher, every university professor, every hospital administrator, every nurse manager, everybody who designs and operates a public transit system, like for every legislator, it's going to take forever. Not only that, but a number of you and a number of us have spent years trying to go out and speak to audiences. They find it inspiring. They applaud. They laugh at our jokes, and they thank us and all that stuff. But things just don't change. As quickly as some barriers come down, new ones are being created. So that isn't a solution. Not only that, we can't wait for people's awareness to be raised before their behavior change. We need to change their behaviors now. The second thing we figured, it should be illegal. You shouldn't be able to do this. So proudly, as you heard, many of us fought to get disability 40 years ago into the Charter of Rights, and we did. That's very exciting. And we fought in various provinces to get into human rights legislation. I was involved in that fight with many others in Ontario, and we did. And these are great laws. The laws aren't defective. They guarantee rights that we need. They define disability broadly. They guarantee our rights in very broad terms. But they got two fatal flaws. Not that we should get rid of them, but they got two fatal flaws that preclude them from solving our problem that I started with. The first flaw is they assume that every one of us with a disability has to be a private accessibility cop. We got to investigate the barriers, and then we got to sue everybody who's got the barriers to try to make them change. And under the Human Rights Code and the Charter, it takes forever, and who's got the time? We'd have no time left to eat, sleep, go to the washroom, or live if all we did was litigate those barriers, and we still wouldn't be able to get to all of them. And the other problem is, if you are an organization that actually wants to do the right thing, if you're a school administrator or a business manager or a government department manager, you go, okay, what do I have to do to achieve a barrier-free society for people with disabilities in my organization, in my school, in my business, whatever? You pick up the Human Rights Code and the Charter, and they say important things. They say don't discriminate. They say you've got a duty to accommodate and all that stuff. But they don't tell you how wide to make the doors. They don't tell you not to use PDF, or that if you post a document in PDF, that a lot of people won't be able to read it. They don't tell you that WebEx presents accessibility problems. Zoom is more accessible for distance learning or distance meeting. They don't tell you any of that stuff. So they leave it to each organization to have to hire consultants and reinvent the accessibility wheel. That's about the most inefficient way of trying to solve a problem. Therefore, we need a new law, we said. We need a new law not to replace the rights we enjoy under the Human Rights Code and the Charter, but to make sure that they are effectively implemented without us having to fight barriers one at a time. So that's what led us in Ontario, starting in 1994, to fight for the Disability Act, which we finally won in 2005. And what does it say? What do you need this law to do? You need it to do really three things. First, it's got to set a goal. The goal's got to be a barrier-free society, nothing less, not improving accessibility, not substantially removing barriers. It's got to be the real total goal, a barrier-free society. And it's got to set a deadline. If we don't have a deadline, things just won't happen. People, governments, businesses, others, school boards, they'll say, oh, we've made some progress, but we won't live long enough to see that realized. You need a deadline. And the Ontario law in 2005, 16 years ago, set 20 years, set 2025. More about that in a minute. The second thing it's got to do is it's got to put someone in charge. It's not good enough to just say we got to achieve accessibility and pop the champagne corks and congratulations and then go back to business as usual, because that won't solve it. We need We need someone in charge, and it's the government, the provincial government. Not that the government's going to go out and tear down every barrier in every business. No, they can't do it that way. But the government can do something. And the law then, the third point, tells the government what they got to do. They got to do two things. Number one, they have to pass a series of binding enforceable regulations called accessibility standards, which will spell out sector by sector, education, healthcare, transportation, employment, so on, what barriers need to be removed and by when. And they can be different depending on whether it's a big business or a small business or a big city or a small town. But the timelines can vary. They will tell you what you got to do, when you got to do them by. And the second thing the government's got to do is they got to effectively enforce those standards. And if they do that right, then the standards will spell out what needs to be done so each organization knows what they got to do and doesn't have to reinvent the wheel or hire consultants to figure it out. And if the government effectively enforces the law, then we don't have to become private accessibility cops. Now, this would be done in a way, if it's done right, where it doesn't take away our right to bring individual human rights complaints. We never want to lose that. But hopefully we won't need to use as many of them. Well, how have we done in Ontario and what's happened? Ontario passed the law in 2005. Manitoba passed a weaker one in 2013 as a result of a grassroots disability movement. The Ontario law came from the community. We designed it, we advocated for it, and we won it. The law was passed in Nova Scotia 2017. As you know, federally, a law was passed in 2019. All of them passed unanimously. Liberal, NDP, Conservative, all voted unanimously. BC is working on one, and from what we hear, a couple other provinces may be doing so also. But how's it working? It's reasonable to ask us, how's it working? Well, I'm going to tell you the good news, the bad news, and the good news in Ontario. The good news is we've made some progress. Clearly, we've gone further than we would have if we hadn't gotten this law passed. The bad news is we are not on schedule, and the government's been dragging their feet. And the good news is we have an agenda on how to get back on schedule. This is all on our website, more about our contact information in just a minute. But from that, we think other jurisdictions can learn their lesson. They can learn from us, I should say, learn our lesson on how to do this legislation, how to do it right, how to do it better. Learn from what we've done well, build on what we didn't do so well. And to that end, we've offered that advice to the Manitoba government, the BC government, the federal government, and so on. And a number of those governments have talked to us. They didn't necessarily listen all the way. So what happened? Why do we need a federal act? And you might say, like, why don't we just have a federal act and then we don't need all these 10 provincial acts? I'm actually giving a class at the end of my talk for you on that very subject at my law school. That's why I've got to go at 2:30 Toronto time. I guess it's 3:30 your time, because I'm teaching that class right after this. But in a nutshell, the way Canada's constitution works, I am terribly sorry I got to bore you with constitutional law, but I'm only going to do it for a minute. But the way our constitution works, Parliament in Ottawa does not have all the powers that the U.S. Congress has. The U.S. Congress passed a law called the Americans with Disabilities Act in 1990. It's had a very substantial impact. It's got its weaknesses, but it's had a much bigger impact, I think, than our laws have had in a number of areas for a bunch of reasons. I can answer questions on that if you like. But the U.S. Congress can regulate accessibility in the states a lot more than our Parliament can. So for things like schools, colleges, universities, local transportation, local business that's not interprovincial, healthcare, and so on, the provinces in Canada have most of the power. The federal government has a sphere it can regulate. It can regulate federal services, it can regulate the army, it can regulate air travel, banking, and there are some things it can do in the provincial sphere, but we need 10 provincial accessibility laws. That's just the way our constitution works. It's not the most efficient way of doing things, believe me. But nevertheless, we and others in 2015 advocated to the federal parties to pass a federal act. the Liberals agreed to, the NDP and the Greens agreed to, the Tories under Stephen Harper said they would, but never did. A bill was brought forward, a whole lot of organizations, including ours, advocated on it. When it came time, when Parliament passed it, it had some things that the Ontario Act didn't have, but it had some things that was missing that the Ontario Act did have. So and our biggest worry is it's just not very mandatory. It lets the government do a bunch of things, but doesn't set timelines and didn't set an end date. So unlike at the provincial level, federally, after it gets through Parliament, the House of Commons, it had to go to the Senate. I went to the Senate in the in the spring of 2019. So a number of us disability organizations said, let's go to the Senate and try to get them to strengthen it. Now, some disability organizations thought, oh, we can't go to the Senate. If we go there, they might change it and then it might die before the election and, take what you get. And our answer was for the AODA Alliance, for Arch Disability Law Center, some other organizations, we said, you know what? We're not giving up. We're not prepared to just walk away and say to the Senate, just stamp it as is. So we and others persuaded the Senate to make some amendments, not as many as we needed, including setting the 2040 deadline for federal accessibility. And then the bill got kicked back to the House of Commons just before the election. It passed there. Now, how are they doing? I think they're going really slow, way slower than we needed. They should have done a lot more that I think they made bigger promises of what the bill would do than they did do. I can take your questions on it. But again, I think we're better with these than without them. So what do you do? Let me conclude by what do you do in New Brunswick? I'm going to offer you just a couple of tips. Number one, my advice is if you haven't done this already, and I'm sorry I haven't been up to speed as much. I'm sorry Jerry Harris wasn't able to make it today. He's been doing excellent work trying to press on this up till now and keeping us posted. But the first thing you do is you just declare it as an objective. We want a New Brunswick Disability Act, whatever you want to call it. And our goal is a barrier-free province by a deadline, and articulate some core principles that it should adhere to. Don't worry about the details. Don't try to write the bill. Just set out the principles. And steal ours. We came up with some. They were borrowed by British Columbia. Barrier-free BC came up and took ours and made them better. Feel free to use that. And if you email me, I can give you whatever you need or connect you with the BC people or Manitoba or whoever. Then go to government, start demanding it of the parties, and we can talk more about political action strategy. But the whole goal is to get the government to get a bill introduced that you could discuss. Now, if I was designing a law for BC, I would say, first, what do we know that works? And for that, the good news is that you've got a discussion paper, which I wrote and we got published, which I can send you, on what should have been in the federal law. And there's a lot of research that's went into that and experience. And also, we and others did a policy conference in the summer of 2017 on YouTube on what should be in the federal law. And I interviewed experts from all over the world. So you can watch that in 3 hours and read our 30-page discussion paper. There's all your research. Now, it's for the feds, but most of the ideas are easily transplanted, if not all of them, to the province. And the last thing I'll tell you is it's worth thinking about how do you design this for a smaller province? Because so far, Ontario is a big province, and we did it. Feds are big. But you want to think about how to tailor it in a way that a smaller province can achieve the same goals, where it doesn't have the same population and size of government to deal with it. That's not hard to do, and we can talk about that. Anyway, I have just given you your whole summary of 25 years of advocacy on this. What I want you to know in conclusion, and I want to kick it over to you for questions or discussion, is this. When we started fighting for this back in 1994, there was 20 of us in a room. And let me tell you what we didn't have that you do have. Number one, we didn't have any idea that you could win this kind of law. You now know we did in Ontario. was done by a similar group in Manitoba, federally, and so on. We didn't know what to ask for in it. We literally started a movement for legislation, but we didn't know all the details to include in it. Well, you got 25 years of experience on that you can draw on. That heavy lifting's been done. That's not to say you can't come up with better ideas. Please do. But you got a whole lot that you can draw on. Number 3, we didn't have any experience organizing a cross-disability coalition to fight for this. Well, folks, we've had tons of experience around the country, not just my coalition, but others that you can draw on. It's doable. Number 4, we didn't have any politicians who were used to saying this was a good idea. We had to start from scratch. Well, you can draw on folks from all parties that we can point you to. Former ministers who brought the legislation in and so on. And 2 more things that we didn't have. We did not have anything like social media. We didn't have Zoom. We didn't have Twitter. Email was just starting. We didn't even establish our website till the second half, I think, of 1998, 3 years into it. We didn't have Facebook. We didn't have YouTube. We didn't have smartphones. We didn't have any of this stuff. We had to organize people using like mail, like snail mail and stuff like that. And people had to get together to an in-person meeting. I couldn't have talked to you about this back then unless you bought me an airline ticket and stuck me in some, crappy hotel and gave me lousy donuts to eat. God, I've eaten enough of those in this quarter century. Now, here I am. I can talk to you right now from Toronto. It's not costing any of us a dime, right? We're just using Zoom and the internet. And you want to hold planning meetings and ask me for some advice or other of my colleagues? We can do it. It's not hard. We didn't have any of that, but there's one more thing we didn't have that you have, and I want to be your gateway to get this. With this, I'm going to wrap up. We didn't have the AODA Alliance website, which tells you the whole story. AODAalliance.org. AODAalliance.org. We've got an education page. We've got a healthcare page. We've got a COVID page. We even have a page on trying to fight against electric scooters. We have an employment page, a transportation page. You can learn all about the details on a lot of this stuff there. We have an email list. If you go to our webpage, AODAalliance.org, in fact, go there right now while we're talking. There's a sign-up link. Plug in your email address. You'll get our updates. Steal our stuff. We want you to. Right? We are not going to say, hey, you plagiarized us. To the contrary, we're going to say, please, take it and use it. We have a YouTube video list. We have lectures that we've done at Osgood, media interviews, and I'm going to be releasing more of this stuff. If you want to know about the fight of COVID and disability, I can send you a link to a lecture on it. If you want to know about the fight for education for students with disabilities, I can send you links to lectures on it, TV interviews on it, the whole bit. Same healthcare. We've got all sorts. If you go to the youtube.com and just search on AODA Alliance or David Lepofsky, either of those, I'm the chair, you can find all sorts of videos. They're captioned, they're available. They'll give you they talk about how to do community organizing. They summarize what we've gotten, and so on. And finally, we're on Twitter at AODA Alliance. Please follow us on Twitter. We tweet extensively on this at AODA Alliance. And we have a Facebook page, which is just our full name, Accessibility for Ontarians with Disabilities Act Alliance. Like our Facebook page and share our posts. We don't do as much on Facebook as we do on Twitter, but folks, you can get tons through all of those avenues. We didn't have any of that 25 years ago. And yet that 20 people in that room lit the kindling that led to a fire, that led to the legislation that's had an impact not only in Ontario, but I believe has helped motivate folks elsewhere around the country. In closing, the day that the AODA was going for third reading in May of 2005. We knew it was going to pass. We knew it was going to pass unanimously. I went for lunch with a buddy of mine before I went down to the legislature. It was pretty giddy, pretty exciting after 10 years of fighting for this with my colleagues. But I went for lunch to a Chinese restaurant. I got a fortune cookie. It was amazing. I opened the fortune cookie and it had a fortune inside. I'm blind. It didn't come out in Braille because it would have had to be on a fortune cake to be big enough to have a Braille fortune. But I handed it to my buddy, and my buddy read it to me, and I thought this summarized the 10 years that was culminating that day, and I convey that fortune to you. Every great accomplishment, and it was for our community a great accomplishment, every great accomplishment is at first impossible. Never be afraid that fighting for this legislation is hard to do. The first day you start, it looks impossible, but when it's over and done, you won, it's doable. Back to you. Thank you for including me, and I'm happy to take your questions.
So thank you very much.
I'm also going to stop the recording so that questions are not going to be recorded.
Well, thank you very much, Mr. Lepofsky. You've given a great presentation today, and we really appreciate you sharing your experiences with us in New Brunswick based on the work that you've done in Ontario and other parts of the country. You've given us a number of ideas to move forward with. Due to timing, we unfortunately are not going to be able to have a live question and answer period. But I would ask if anyone has any questions or comments for David to put them in the chat function, and then the coordinators of the coalition will get those back to him and get you the responses as soon as they can. We are going to continue with the agenda as we are running about 10 minutes behind, and we have 3 speakers left. So,
okay, well, can I just do this? I'm going to have to go in a couple of minutes. So if you do have any questions you want me to answer, I'm happy to take a couple now, or if you're out of time, I'll sign off and then we will catch up again next time I can help you.
Yeah, what we're going to do, Mr. Lepofsky, is we're asking people to put their questions in the chat function of the Zoom application, and then the coordinators of the coalition will send you an email with those questions.
Oh, okay, that's great. All right, listen, so thank you all very much, and best of luck with your work, and anything we can do to help you, we're there to help you.
Thank you very much. We really appreciate your ongoing commitment to making our society more inclusive, and please keep up the great work.
Thank you, Dr. Thank you, David Lepofsky, on behalf of the Board of Directors of the New Brunswick Coalition, Persons with Disabilities Incorporated in New Brunswick, and your presentation was excellent. Thank you.
Thanks so much.
Thank you very much. So we're now going to move on to our next speaker, who is Ainsley Congdon from the Learning Disabilities Association of New Brunswick. I did read her bio before, so I will not read that again. So Ainsley, thank you for your patience and understanding, and over to you.
Hi, everybody. It's nice to be here. My name is Ainsley Congdon, and I am the Executive Director of LDAMB. We're a provincial org that has been around for 50 years. But just because we've been around that long, people still don't truly understand what learning disabilities are. So I thought I would start off with I'm a teacher, so my very brief non-psychological definition. So a learning disability affects the way that people hear, take in information, process information, and then the way they deliver it back out. So we currently deal a lot with youth and students that are still in school, so post-secondary. And we rely on, we get a lot of information and information requests from parents who don't know how to navigate the system, and they don't know how to access a psych ed for their child. And so my hope for the clients and the kiddos that we serve is, if there is a Disability Act in New Brunswick, that there is a specific section or committee for education, and in education is included is learning disabilities. So I'm talking about students with dyslexia, dysgraphia, dyscalculia, executive functioning, working memory issues. And I firmly believe that if people have equal access to education and can achieve their where they're going to go and achieve their best, then they will not have the same kinds of issues with employment, post-secondary education, maintaining employment, housing, poverty, if they are educated properly. And if you think about the entire wealth of and variety of disabilities that exist, someone who has a mobility disability may also have an LD that might get overlooked because they are relying and focusing solely on the mobility disability. Or if someone who is deaf, you know, they could also have an LD, and that opens up a whole other heap of challenges, because how do you diagnose someone who is deaf or hard of hearing for an LD? The same with someone who is blind. There is nothing wrong with the capabilities or the capacity of students and adults with LDs to learn. So they are highly employable and can go above and beyond minimum wage jobs. And so I think the Disability Act in this province really needs a strong education focus. I'm pleased that the coalition invited me to speak today, but I must say I'm disappointed that education is not one of the pillars that you have chosen to focus on. And yeah, I see Lisa saying long wait list for psych eds. That needs to be addressed, and I'm working on that. So I think education is key to the success and the longevity of this province. And I think more needs to be done. Thank you.
Ainsley, I want to thank you for your presentation, but as chair of the coalition, I will have discussions both with the executive and our board, and I'm glad you brought it to our attention regarding education. And definitely that is something we would want to have more talks with you and make that a priority.
Yeah, thank you. I know Amanda and Lisa have commented, and I received both of your emails, ladies, so I'll follow up with you as well.
And no one knows
Ainsley,
this.
I just wanted to,
I will share this as part of Ainsley's presentation. I am an adult with learning disabilities. I've been an advocate for LD for a lot of years. I was on the board of Learning Disabilities Association for 10 years. And I am very thankful she was willing to speak today.
Ainsley, I just want to throw out there, I've been a teacher for the last 17 years, langue seconde français, but I can't work anymore from extended exposure to perfumes and chemicals and all that. I can't leave my house. But I am a resource teacher as well, and I am qualified. The district paid for it before I went out to sick to do the psych eds. Now, would they count it as a legal psych ed? Doubtfully, but I am a resource to help some people, like even if they just don't want to use it for legal purposes, but just, I guess, to help them understand. I am a person there. I don't have my kit. The school board took it from me when I left the school, but I can help with that in English and French. So I'm just a resource there. But I would love to get your opinion on this, since we have you as an expert on here.
Sure.
I understand the frustration, because as a resource teacher, you would do 18 hours of paperwork easily on each student. And 8 months later, you might get a computer from 1912 that then would work with the talk and text speech or whatever they needed, right? Like just horrific stuff. Or they would come from another school and the school would hang on to it, even though it's supposed to travel with them. And it's just the frustration, and the peers would get so frustrated at us, and they had no idea what, you know, would bring me to tears nightly. And then my youngest, who has autism, started at Nova Scotia Community College 2 years ago as a welder. We had to make her repeat grade 3. We weren't sure. We were told originally from her first psych ed that she was not going to finish high school. She's so learning disabled that she would have been clarified like with a severe mental disability, but because she had such great coping skills, they bumped her up a little bit, is how Margaret explained it to me. The resources available to them at community college, unbelievable. Where is that in the school system? Like, there has to be a change there. It's disgusting.
Don't even get me started. So I have a good relationship with the Department of Ed, and I am working on specific things related to programs that will help literacy. So specifically those that students with dyslexia and dysgraphia. Access to assistive technology. Anytime I have an ear of the department, I bring that up because that is so poor. I had a conversation with leads from a district in this province who, and I hate comparing one disability group to another, but LDs don't get a priority. They told me that. And so if they see an LD diagnosis, they will not get the tech they need. A kid who has the proper tools and technology in class have independence, they can do their work. You know, they do not need to have a scribe or a reader if they're given the training they need on that tool. They don't need the human resource necessarily to go along with it. It's as simple as having that speech to text and having that tool that can then take them into the workplace, post-secondary, and employment. And I know Mario will talk about employment later, so that's good. And so, you know, if they have those things when they're in school, they'll have it as a skill when they become an adult. And so all of this stuff is happening in the background. We're a small nonprofit. There's 2 of us that work here full time, and I'm ready to take on the change that's needed in this province. I am a teacher, and this is what I do.
Beautiful.
And the people who are wanting to connect, my email's in the chat if you scroll up.
Okay.
So
there's something
any
I
other
want
questions?
right here. There's something I want to bring up actually. For me, when I was younger and the whole school system back in the day, there was like, I kept taking like epileptic seizures really, really bad. And that was like, the teachers couldn't handle it. So my mom had to really take over what, like, as my teacher, and they said, well, you can't do that. Well, it's the only way that you can really teach your son or daughter whatever disability they have. And when I went to Matthew Martin High School, it seems like there was always people with intellectual disabilities, like in one corner, kind of treated in one little classroom, and there was always like the regular kids, but it was like, you know, it's not the thing that when you have a disability, like everyone should be treated equally, whether they need a computer, a tablet, whether they need, you know, in the same classroom. It's not just about one thing, you know, and that's what's very important, whether you're a teacher, a student, and you want to pursue what you want in life.
Tammy, that's a great point, and thank you for sharing that perspective. Ainsley, do you have anything you want to respond to that?
No, just for, I see that there's a few parents who want to reach out. If they scroll up in the chat, I put my contact information, and I'm willing to sit down with you and have a longer conversation about your child and the support you may need. So I look forward to talking to you.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Ainsley. If anybody has any additional questions for Ainsley, once again, please include them in the chat box, and the coalition will communicate between Ainsley and you to help support that. But Ainsley, once again, thank you very much for your leadership with the learning disability community, and I look forward to continuing working with you. So our next speaker is Mario Lazier. Mario has always been passionate about helping the vulnerable population and a strong advocate on their behalf. With a background working with the public sector for various entities, including social development, he's always mitigated in favor of the importance of accessible and inclusive lifestyle. As manager, as the manager for CCRW Employment Services in Moncton and a member of the Moncton Accessibility Committee, she advocates for individuals with disabilities looking for meaningful employment. She's a graduate from the University of Moncton and working in this community ever since. She holds this community at heart. So Mario, thank you for joining us today, and I'll hand it over to you.
Thank you. Thank you for having me. Thank you to Brent and Muriel, Shelley, the whole committee for having me, giving me the opportunity to speak a little bit about CCRW, about employment for individuals with disability. I see a lot of familiar faces, a lot of new faces as well. I know it's great that we have MP Long with us. We also have members from Jenica Atwin's office here, and former minister and MLA Dr. Ed Dorothy with us. I think it's fantastic that we have such a wide group here represented this afternoon. So thank you for that. Just a quick introduction on myself. My name is Mario Lejar. I am from the Greater Moncton area. Spent all my life really here. Started working with CCRW in 2013. I was out of university and kind of by luck, by faith, whatever you want to call it, fell upon this job of helping youth under 30 find employment, youth with barriers because of disability, because of poverty, because of all sorts of things, find work and keep work. And I quickly realized that there was a lot of, there was a big lack in our community for individuals with such barriers to find employment. What was interesting is after the program was done, 10 out of the 12 youths were actually working full-time. However, the two that were without employment after the program were the facilitators because the program had ended. And I thought, geez, we need to have continuous, we need to have a system in place where we can build on our experiences. Fast forward a few years, I got to work with various departments in the government of New Brunswick, such as social development. I also spent some time in finance and really saw the link between a good social background and economic success. And I used to work with an individual who I have a lot of respect, who used to say, if we would have a Preventions Canada, we might not need a Corrections Canada. And that resonated a lot with me. And I think prevention is a lot of what we advocate at CCRW in terms of employment. Basically, CCRW, just to give you a broad example, we have offices across Canada, 14 different sites from St. John's, Newfoundland to Surrey, BC, by Moncton, New Brunswick, and also St. John, New Brunswick. 70 employees across Canada. Our mission is simple. It's to promote, to support meaningful and equitable employment of people with disabilities. We are innovators and agents of change. We build partnerships, develop skills, share knowledge, and influence attitudes. So I think that summarizes a lot of what we do, what we thrive for at CCRW. Couple of programs in our province that I think is important to note. One is employment services. This is the program that I work closely with. We are a team of 5 individuals. We help individuals with disabilities get the tools that they need in order to be successful in the workplace. And by tools, we're talking about accommodations. We're talking about interpreters for the deaf community. We're talking about relationship with employers and understanding that not every employee is the same. We need individual plans in order to be successful. We also have Youth the Future program, which is the program that I had started with at CCRW a few years ago. working with youth with barriers. Sometimes it's mental health, it could be physical disability, it could be learning disability. So much in for it. And in St. John, there's the Partners program as well. We offer counseling services at CCRW on 4 pillars that we really focus on. One is career making decisions. The second is skill enhancement. The third is job search and employment maintenance. I'll just go quickly on some of them. So career making decisions is really focusing on a career choice, a career path. Sometimes a lot of questions. Should I go to school? Should I pursue my education? Or should I go directly to the workforce? We want to make sure that individuals make the best possible decision based on their needs and on their wants. Skill enhancement, and I'm going to touch a lot on what Ainsley just mentioned, but it's the support. It's to give the tools for individuals to have a chance of being successful in college, in university. Sometimes it's to get a GED. We know that individuals with proper education will have a way better chance of finding a job and being able to keep a job. So we really want to build on that, and we want to give them the tools. If it's a psychoeducational assessment, yes, let's get the assessment. Let's get the recommendations from professionals. We know what they want. Let's get it. Let's give people the tools they need to be successful. In terms of learning disability, I think we have a long way to go in general public. I think it was last year, I was with not a colleague, a friend of mine, and I was talking about my job and talking about learning disabilities and the impact that, with accommodations, how we can help people. And my friend looked at me and says, do you believe in that? Do you believe in learning disabilities? So we have a long way to go in order to educate the public and to demystify some of that false information out there. It's not only to provide information, but it's to correct some of the false information out there. We talked about a barrier-free society. I think it was George who mentioned that earlier today, and it really struck me. And I think we can all agree, anybody in general say, yeah, we need a barrier-free society. But until it's a law, I don't think we'll ever see it. Until we're obligated to do something, I think it's human nature that we not necessarily do it. In the 80s, it was wearing a seatbelt. Well, I assume we all knew that, yeah, it was probably a good idea to wear a seatbelt, but it had to become a law in order for us to become mandatory to wear a seatbelt in a car. One of the things that I think is important too is to navigate the system. And I heard it from a comment earlier today. Bureaucracy is complicated. We can have a lot of experience knowing where are such programs, what program can help me. Anyone who comes to CCRW, we want to work as a team and help as a team. So if it's sending someone to another organization to get the proper help that they need for their basic help, that's what we'll do. So I encourage this group, all groups, all nonprofits, the private sector. This is a project of society. I think we all need to work together and never forget that. I think it's a team effort, a collective effort. And if we want to achieve our common goals, we need to stick together, or it'll be very, very difficult to achieve those goals. Quickly, job search is important for us. We want to provide accommodations. We work with deaf community who they need interpreters in order to get properly trained on a job site. Without interpreters, it's impossible. It's impossible to expect someone to perform in a job placement. Whatever the disability is, we need to make sure that people are properly trained and have the resources to do that. I will let you with one positive success story, because I think it's important that we understand the challenges, but we also look at at some of the great stories out there. And it's a personal story of an individual that I helped, an individual that came to our office who was on social assistance, a single mom, but wanted to work. This person really wanted to get a job. In order to get a job, she needed hearing aids because she couldn't hear. Social development, as you know, they have programs, but sometimes they're not exactly what a person needs to be successful in the workforce. So it was all about hearing aids. We just couldn't help this person get the proper hearing equipment that she needed in order to be successful in the workplace. Despite that, she found a job. She found a job caring for seniors. And she found that job right when mid-March 2020, middle of the pandemic. We were all hiding at home, staying at home, being told stay home. This person was taking the bus, going to help for seniors in a nursing home. Luckily, we were able to set up a meeting and have proper accommodations plans set up for her hearing aids and for other small things within the nursing home that could be done to accommodate her needs. This person excelled at her role all throughout the summer and realized that if I go to school, I can make more money and I can provide for my son. I can provide for my son. She is now enrolled in college, and we noticed difficulty learning, reading, understanding what she was reading. We did a self-assessment tool test, and this person was sent for a psychoeducational assessment. Learning disability was discovered. Now this person has the tools in order to learn, is not only doing good at school, but is getting ready to graduate in just a few short months and will be working full-time as a nurse, looking to become at some point a registered nurse. This person less than 2 years ago was on social assistance and people were denying her a fair and equitable way to get simple hearing aids. Think about that for a minute, how giving a person the tools that they need can help achieve their goals. And I'm going to end it like that. I just want to thank everyone for letting me the chance to speak a little bit today. If you have any questions or you guys want to reach out to me directly, please feel free to reach out to Brent or we can share my email coordinate in the chat room. I'd be happy to help or to provide assistance in any way I can. So thank you very much.
Hi, this is Marisa. If I may, I'd like to make a couple of comments regarding Ainsley and the last presentation. I thank you both. One of the things that I'm very grateful with the last presentation that you mentioned about the deaf community. First of all, I know that there's, due to finances and so on, because I spoke to Brent regarding this, there was no funds for interpreters for this session, which made me feel very bad because that's very exclusive and not allowing them to be included. So I'm very thankful that there's at least a voice here for persons that have a deaf or hard of hearing. And I understand the financial problem, so I just wanted to put that out there because I'm hoping that, say, MP Wayne Long or our government or somebody can help facilitate the funds for interpreters for these type of forums, because it's very important that they have a voice. I actually spoke with the executive director of NB HRD today, and you know, and we were talking about this very thing about exclusion and not being able to participate in this type of things because of lack of interpreters. The other thing that I wanted to mention is regarding employment and school for those with sensory disabilities and learning disabilities. One of the things that, being a legally blind person, trying to navigate the education system and and the workforce, one of the things that I found very difficult was accessing the technology and getting the technology, because the only way that I could access the technology is if I was going to go to school or if I was going to work. And the thing is I would get the technology right at the same time as I'm starting my school. I didn't know how to use that technology. And so doing the education and or the being placed in a work, you're trying to learn those new skills from the educational system or the workforce, but you're also trying to learn this new technology that you've never experienced before. And I strongly believe that this is part of the Disability Act needs to be that those with learning disabilities, sensory disabilities, have those type of supports in place before they can go out and get a job or education and that sort of thing. Because I know even for those that with vision loss, a lot of times we are placed in a as though we have a mental disability or cognitive or a learning disability, when that's not our disability at all. Our disability is that we can't see that chalkboard or some of the visual cues and things like that. So then we are, because we struggle with the learning of it, we're saying, oh, well, you have a learning disability, but that's not what the problem is. It's because I hadn't been able to see all those cues and things like that. Anyway, I just wanted to thank you, and thank you, Brand and the coalition, for having this forum.
Just quickly, Marissa, we did get an email from another person who was also requiring closed captioning. So what I'm going to try to do, and try is the key word here, but I'm going to take the recording and then put it through my phone where I have a talk to text software and see if I get the bulk of the minutes that make sense. And if that's the case, I can also forward you a copy of that if that would be beneficial. It's not a great solution by any means, but it's at least a bit of a solution right now. And we are going to find a platform for next time around and make sure that this is inclusive for all.
Exactly. It's just, I just wanted to let you know that I'm not angry about it. I just want to see everyone being able to have a voice and to be able to participate. And I was very, actually, when I signed on and heard that you were doing the closed captioning thing, I was very pleased to hear that. So I do appreciate that. Thank you.
Okay.
Patty has a comment.
Go ahead.
Hi, my name is Patty O'Donnell. I'm from St. John here, and I have a disability. Actually, I have two. I have a learning disability, and I am blind. And I agree that when I was in school, there was no technology or anything or aids. I mean, I had to follow, and also too for employment, it was tough. I was lucky to get what I was able to get. Not seeing it, and I think we need for people who are blind, we need more aids out there, and we also need to be able, if we need to have the aids all the time, and there's no funding, and it's really struck that people that even deaf that lose on employment because they can't bring or have the support that they need to fill their job.
Great. Thank you very much for raising those points, Patty. And I know the committee will add that to their list of potential points to consider as you're building their plan of action. So now we're going to move on to our next speaker. Our next speaker is our closing speaker for today. Her name is Stephanie Cadieux. Stephanie was the first elected MLA. Was first elected MLA for Surrey Panorama in 2009, and elected MLA for Surrey Coverdale in 2013. Re-elected again in 2017, and then again for Surrey South in 2020. She currently serves as the Hawkers Chair and the official opposition credit for gender equity, accessibility, and inclusion. She's a member of the Select Standing Committee on Crown Corporations and served as vice chairs on committees to appoint the representative for children and the Human Rights Commissioner. Stephanie served as Minister for Children and Family Development, Minister of Social Development, Minister of Community, Sport, and Cultural Development, and Minister of Labor, Citizen Services, and Open Government. She also previously held roles as co-chair for Advanced Education and Finance and critic for ICBC. Stephanie worked with SCI BC, that's Spinal Cord Injury BC, as Director of Marketing and Development, and was Manager of Accessibility for 2010 Legacies Now. She's been an active community volunteer and was the president of the Real Sphere Society, a member of the advisory panel with the International Collaboration on Repair Discoveries, and mentor with the YWCA. Thank you very much, Stephanie, and we'll hand it over to you.
Well, thank you very much. I really appreciate you inviting me to join you today. And I'm going to share my thoughts today from a number of perspectives. As a person with a disability, as somebody who's been an advocate and a service provider, I actually sat on the board of the BC Coalition for People with Disabilities back in the early 2000s, and as a legislator. And I've spent 12 years now in the legislature of British Columbia, advocating for change and certainly providing an ongoing commentary for legislators about the needs of people with disabilities. By nature, I am an optimist, but I'm also a pragmatist and a risk taker. So while I spent years believing that we just needed to educate people and that change would follow, I've shifted my thinking over the years to the fact that we need more stick and less carrot. And I'm certainly in support of standalone accessibility legislation. That said, I recognize that there are challenges to legislating the depth and breadth of things that we all want to see changed. There are limitations on what legislation can and can't do effectively. These are challenges that I'm expecting we're going to discuss when BC's legislation is tabled, hopefully later this spring. I'm thinking sometime later this month. In my time in government, I was able to move the agenda forward, making significant changes to our persons with disabilities income supports, relating to earnings exemptions and asset and trust exemptions. I championed a province-wide consultation that led to a commitment by government to a document titled Accessibility 2024, which essentially listed 12 building blocks of things that government needed to advance for access and inclusion, which included a look forward to legislation post Bill C-81's introduction federally. We put a plan in place, an advisory structure called the President's Group, to work collaboratively to drive employment opportunities and support inclusive hiring in the province. And in our last two campaigns, my party has committed to accessible housing legislation and some other programmatic changes to advance the agenda around people and work. Unfortunately, we weren't successful. So instead, I've highlighted those things in the last couple of years through private members' bills. Now, there's no doubt that we have much more to do. The positive thing in my mind is that the stars have been aligning in terms of understanding of the need and value of diversity in the workplace, accessible environments, and I believe we've largely reached a place of consensus that we need to do more. But now we have to debate how and what. And in my mind, the statistics provide a very good basis for making the case. In British Columbia, for example, there are 926,000 people with some form of disability, representing almost 25% of the population. And as the population ages, the number of people with disabilities and the severity, of course, increases. But in any case, in my mind, This whole thing needs to be reframed for society. This 25% is not a discrete group. It is not a group that needs something special. In fact, it's 25% of every group, every market segment or target, every cultural group, every workplace, and every community. I think if we reframe it in that way, and we will start to see people recognize that accommodations are not something special for someone. They're just a requirement for people to be active members of our community. It's clear that people with disabilities continue to feel disenfranchised by policies that are ineffective because they weren't developed with a lens on accessibility. Governments and private sector organizations have for years espoused the values of inclusion and accessibility, and in fact, a lens on disability, but too often it isn't required and it gets missed, or frankly, unconscious bias allows people to decide it isn't needed. And then we build new problems. As we all know, Canada has a robust human rights system, strong anti-discrimination laws. Disability is a protected ground under the laws and the Charter of Rights and Freedoms. Our country is a signatory to the UN Declaration on the Rights of Persons with Disabilities, but the challenge is not the high-level statements or buy-in. It's rather that the anti-discrimination laws are reactive. We have to wait until we encounter a barrier and are denied a service to take action and call it out. Then the system kicks in to determine if that denial was discriminatory. We literally have to wait until people are discriminated against before we help them. The laws in place, the laws place that burden on advancing human rights on each of us as individuals with disabilities. The opportunity for system change through that process is very limited and costly. So I want to give credit to BC's NDP government, who has also committed to accessibility legislation in their previous platforms. They embarked on a broad community consultation when they took power in 2017. They framed those discussions around proposing a legislative model informed by the principles of the UN Declaration, the UN Declaration on the Rights of Indigenous Peoples, and the Accessible Canada Act. So the proposed legislation would guide the development, implementation, and enforcement of accessibility standards. It'll draw on the expertise and experience of people with disabilities. Accessibility standards could cover a variety of areas, including service delivery, education, employment, housing, the built environment, information and communication, and transportation, and would rely on an appropriate mix of incentives, compliance, and enforcement. So now we wait and see what they have drafted. My guess is that the legislation will resemble Bill C-81 and largely be what we call enabling legislation. So what are the challenges? Well, and I'll quote from the summary document of the government's consultation. During the consultation, people shared stories about the challenges they experienced, the barriers they faced every day, including physical, social, environmental, attitudinal, financial, communication, and information related. People were on the need for universal design and the definition of disability needing to be broad and inclusive and consider the full range of people with disabilities, whether that be short-term, episodic, or chronic. People with invisible disabilities, including those with brain injuries, learning disabilities, mental health challenges, those on the autism spectrum, also express challenges that they face in having their needs met. And I think as you read in the chat and have heard from each other today, and from the other speakers, I was really glad I was able to hear the other speakers, especially David. I follow him on Twitter. The reality is it highlights the complexity of what individuals hope legislation can address. And as a legislator, frankly, my fear is that legislation may be too high level. It may focus on the disability lens on government programs and services. And while this is important, I don't know too many people who on a daily basis spend their time thinking about interacting with government. The barriers that individuals want to see removed by the legislation are things that have to have meaning to them closer to home. Barriers accessing restaurants with friends, transportation, doctor's offices, finding employment. There are, of course, thousands of more examples, and different people with different needs will prioritize those things differently. But I provide these as an example of the reach the legislation needs to have, or that individuals want the legislation to have. because while those individual needs are real, the solutions need to be systemic. Setting standards will be challenging, and certainly the community needs to and expects to see themselves at the table. But this needs to balance, in my mind, a desire to harmonize standards across jurisdictions. The multitude of standards and guidelines and codes across the country, across sectors and so on, add confusion. But how do we set up a harmonized standard that will be responsive? The framework for accessibility legislation suggested that accessibility standards could be developed in a variety of areas: service delivery, education, customer service, employment, including hiring and retention, the built environment, such as entranceways, parks, sidewalks, and in my mind, housing, information and communication, for example, websites, print materials, emergency information, transportation, for example, buses, ferries, and taxis. But finally, the question of governance and how will the legislation be implemented and monitored? How will compliance, enforcement, and incentives be used? And what sort of financial supports from government need to be in place to successfully implement whatever scheme is legislated? Certainly, I hope and believe it is shared by the majority that legislation is only one, albeit essential, part of a broader strategy to bring about cultural awareness and change and to facilitate meaningful inclusion. This is a process we are about to encounter or to embark on in our legislature. I'm excited about that as a person with a disability, as the first woman with a disability elected to office in British Columbia, the first woman with a disability to sit at the cabinet table. Proud to be a part of a party that up until recently had 3 members of our cabinet who use wheelchairs for mobility. And change, even in that circumstance, even with those people at the table, even with that advocacy, change is slow and it's difficult and it's complex. And you are now embarking on that in your province. I understand that the Premier's office and the Ministry of Health are looking at how they're going to provide and roll out consultations about legislation. So I hope that, as David said, you will borrow, adapt from those of us who are going before you, that you will make it better, that you will ask questions, that you will reach out. I'm going to put a few links to a few things from BC in the chat when I'm done here, so that if that is helpful to you, you have an easy way to access those things, the consultation report and so on. And good luck. Thanks for having me. If there's anything, questions for me as a legislator or as a person with a disability that is standing with you in terms of the need for this legislation across the country, I welcome that follow-up. Thank you.
Stephanie, on behalf of the executive and the board of directors for the New Brunswick Coalition of Persons with Disabilities, we thank you very much as an elected representative in BC that is further than our province is on this legislation. I want to thank you for your presentation today, and along with the other speakers that have spoken.
Yes, I'd like to echo Brent's words. Thank you, Stephanie. You provide some great insight from your experiences in BC, and there's a lot that we can learn from. Is there any questions for Stephanie?
Stephanie, I do have a question for you, actually. In terms of what you were talking about, which was very, very interesting and a lot of keys, why is it that us as people with intellectual disabilities, when we go to speak out as a voice, like I've called like more than one, what is it, the government or the finance committee, every possible place I could call in Moncton, New Brunswick, and I'm still calling back and they're getting bored of me, but I'm not stopping. So basically what I want to know is, so the minister that I think it's Premier Higgs or whatever it is, anyways, I want to know how can I phrase this? How can you acknowledge, like, to get the attention of somebody to acknowledge what you're trying to say about people with intellectual disabilities that need help immediately, that it's not a joke. This has been going on for a long time. And how do you know what I mean? Do you get what I'm saying?
I do. It is a challenge. It is a real challenge. And I'll tell you, it's a real challenge in my province as well. And it continues to be. The reality from a government perspective is that there's never enough resources to be able to do everything. And there's a scarcity of resources. And that frustrates people, and it creates bureaucracies that are complex to navigate. And the work that you do in the community, supporting each other, coming together as a group to agree on priorities is really important. As an advocate, prior to going into government, I worked for the Spinal Cord Injury Association of BC for 8 years. And during that time, one of the things that I did was coalesce a group of 8 other organizations serving people with disabilities to focus on 3 priorities to put in front of government. That helped amplify the voices. We have some very strong groups here who support people with intellectual disabilities, some very, very active self-advocate groups, and they're doing a really great job of getting their issues and their concerns in front of government, especially through COVID. We've had, I know across the country, people with disabilities have been adversely affected. And it has fallen to the bottom of the list for many governments, and it's not appropriate. It requires action. And coming together like this and coalescing and supporting one another is the first thing to do. But don't give up. Keep writing those letters, keep emailing, keep talking, because people need to know what your needs are.
Yeah. Thank you so much.
Okay, Patty, go.
I have a question. My name is Patty again. My question is, because it's happened to just not me being a person with a disability and a strong self-advocate, and also too, I talk on behalf others that have disabilities. My question is though, it's happening a lot, is people with disabilities, they'll go and speak and tell people what they want. I mean, I say big people, little people, and people with disabilities, they're little people, but how come all the time when a person with a disability is going for something and they get put on the back burner, or they get oh well, we'll discuss that, or if I bring someone else in, they'll listen to the other person that doesn't have a disability than the person that has a disability.
If you want me to take that, it's an ongoing challenge. It really is. And as a person with disability, as an advocate prior to going to government, I know how hard it is to get those issues in front of the right people and get solutions. I also know as an MLA, and I'm not sure if you call your members of the legislature MLAs or not, or of course your MPs federally.
Yes,
in their offices,
MLAs.
they deal with these issues regularly for people, and that is a place to go for help. They can help navigate the systems for you. So that's really important, because it's also how those elected officials start to understand the complexity for individuals, the breadth of issues, and the priorities. It's important, I think, that the government officials continue to hear that people want to work, that people want, all they need is some accommodations to get there. I'll just give a quick example. I started a program in British Columbia as a pilot called the Single Parent Employment Project. I wanted to roll that out similarly to the disability community, but we changed government before I could do that. But the single parent employment initiative, it looked at people who were on income assistance or provincial assistance for their income, and looked at what did they need to get into the workforce. Well, they needed training, they needed childcare, they needed transportation costs covered, and they needed to be able to do all of that without losing their benefits. So we put in place a program that allowed that to happen, and 4,000 parents are now working and supporting their families. We can replicate things like that for the disability community without a great deal of difficulty, but there has to be political will, and that political will comes when organizations and individuals come together and advocate.
Thank you.
We had a question from Julie, I believe.
Yes.
Julie is the founder of
Yes.
the coalition.
Yes.
I have a question for Stephanie.
Go ahead.
Okay, so Stephanie, from your experience, because in New Brunswick, there's a lot of work that needs to be done as far as standards for services, because here we don't have what you guys have in BC as far as paratransit. We struggle with a lot of services, paratransit, home care, financial supports to help pay for technical aids like wheelchairs and all the so from your experience, do you think that a provincial coalition should focus more on a disability act or on getting better services?
Both. And I'll tell you, in BC, there are lots of things that work well. There are lots of things that are still problematic, and people struggle every day. Our paratransit system is very established in the metro centers, but if you live in a rural community, there is none. And even that service in the metro centers is overtaxed and often very unsuccessful. And there is this challenge, as I said, for resources. Government has to make tough decisions, and I was at the cabinet table making them, and it's difficult. And I would argue not one person on any side of the house in our province, in any political elected position, doesn't understand or care. They are doing the best they can with the resources they have to make the best decisions on behalf of everyone in their province. But it does require constant advocacy and constant work. And bit by bit, we can make decisions that improve things. Nothing happens overnight. But I think where I've come to understand the need for legislation, and so it really shifted my own perspective on that, because I really didn't think that was the right way to go when I entered government 12 years ago. But now I see that what we need is that piece of overarching legislation that really sets the tone for everything else, so that every other piece of legislation has to look to that legislation to make sure they are addressing the issues as it relates to something in the Ministry of Education, something in the Ministry of Transportation, something, frankly, in the Ministry of Aboriginal Affairs. The reality is we have to have a goal line, and we have to have a way of measuring progress, or we won't see progress. Things get done when they get measured. So I think that legislation is a legitimate way to do that.
Thank you so much, Stephanie, and thank you for your question, Julie. In the interest of time, we are almost near the end of our scheduled time frame for the presentations today. Thank you, Chairperson. Do you have any closing remarks?
Yes, I want to once again, on behalf of the Board of Directors and the executive of the coalition, which some of them are here today that could be here. This is our first ability forum. We will have others with different topics. I do want to comment, we are already being recognized in New Brunswick because we have a lot of strong voices that are involved in our coalition, and we have grabbed the attention of actually, as of today, we have, even in this ability forum, we have a member of parliament from St. John, Wayne Long, which we have met with. have met with the Member of Parliament for Fredericton, Janica Green. We have met with, during the provincial election, we have met with many elected and re-elected politicians. We right now are fighting the Household Income Policy 6.1. If you don't know what that is, if a person with disability on supports on the province of New Brunswick decides to marry, they could lose all those supports. So that's a very hard thing with someone with a disability, to lose their income and the only income they have. So we have made a strong voice on that issue, and we would like to see it scrapped and changed, and we will continue to fight. And I ask everyone, please go to our website, become a member, make this movement, this coalition stronger. And I guarantee you, I'm very proud of the people I have on my executive and on the board of directors. We are going to make a very big difference in New Brunswick, and we are going to have targets. We're going to want the government and associations and organizations to meet those targets. And I give you my word on that and our coalition. And thank you very much for attending this first ability forum. Also, we have coffee chats every week. Soon that's being remodeled. We are soon going to have topics. Please take part as members in our coffee chats every Sunday. They're growing. We're going to have different issues that we're going to address and get your feedback. But I guarantee, on behalf of all persons with disabilities, things are going to change in the province of New Brunswick. And thank you for attending.
Can I just mention too quickly?
Yes, sure.
One thing, I live in the Fredericton area, so I was at, and you said Jenica Green, but Jenica Atwell, the Green Party.
Sorry.
I was at that's fine. I know you know, at the town hall with her and with Robert, who's on this call. And one of the things Jenica said, and if I could leave my house, I'd be so interested, but she said, run. If you can run for politics and she's there to support us, run, because hey, there's a great way to make noise. And they want women, they want men. We can run. Let's show them that we are able. And so I highly encourage, if I could leave my house, I have a disability that has me housebound. I really think I'd be running, because I've just become so passionate, as a couple of speakers have said, until you lose your health, you don't know what it's like to be disabled. And if I could go out there and fight for all of us together, I would. And if any of you can, contact Jenica, because she's very passionate about this and she will help you get the processes started. And her and Robert right now going, oh man, how much more work does Shelley just put on our plates? But it's a great way for us to get our voice out there.
Yes, I'm glad you made that point. We do have municipal elections that are coming up. And why not people with disabilities running for office on all levels, civic politics, provincial and federal. We have other strong advocates, and I have to mention, I believe very strongly, also Wayne Long of St. John is also a very strong advocate, a person with disabilities. And he's accessible, which that's how it should be when you're elected. And be compassionate and understand to raise and address the issues. And we certainly will keep being in touch with these elected people and our premier and our government. We definitely will be in touch with them and others that we need to advocate on your behalf.
Thanks, Ben.
Jeff.
We did have one question in the comments about accessible transportation service in St. John, and that business has been closed. And the reason it was closed because it wasn't financially sustainable, or with the cost of the vehicle to keep operating. Limited support from government, etc. Once again, it's a little after our end time, so I'm going to have the meeting to a close. But please stay in touch with the coalition. Thank you all for attending today. It's great to see the commitment to making our province more inclusive for people with disabilities. And I hope you all have a great evening.
Thank you, Jeff.
Thank you.